'87. 16-year-old Kari Lynn Nixon left her home to run an errand for her dad at around 9:30 p.m. She bought some groceries at a nearby store and left at around 9:55 p.m. She exchanged greetings with a neighbor at around 10:05 p.m. 5 minutes later, a group of teenagers walked down the street, but Kari was not there. Somehow, she disappeared within just 700 feet of her home. The next day, a massive search began for Kari. However, no trace of her was found. Some believe that she was abducted by a stranger, while others believe that she ran away. On June 5, 1989, the New Kids on the Block filmed a music video at one of their concerts in Los Angeles, California. In March 1991, Kari's parents viewed it and noticed a girl in the audience that looked just like her. Nixon's story made it into a second episode of Unsolved Mysteries, which featured the video clip. New Kids on the Block got involved, asking the girl to step forward. The girl did come forward, but it wasn't Nixon. Then on January 28, 1994, almost 7 years after Kari vanished, her body was unearthed in a shallow grave only miles from her home. Robert Anthony Jones confessed to her kidnapping, rape, and murder. He had been arrested for numerous bank robberies. He had confessed to her murder in an effort to get his wife Teresa a lighter sentence for driving the getaway car from a local bank heist with their 2 children inside. He had kidnapped Kari at gunpoint and drove her to his parents' camp, where he raped, strangled, and shot her. He buried her on the remote J property the following morning. At the time, he was 23 years old and living in Bar Harbor, Maine, with his family. He had returned to his hometown for a long week visit when he abducted Kari, whom he had spotted while he was buying beer at the local store. He later returned to the Osable Forks area where he settled with his family, only 200 yards from where he had buried her. Under the negotiated plea, he secured an 18-year-to-life sentence for the robbery. One morning in October 1966, 38-year-old Louise Pietrowick kissed her daughter, her only child, goodbye as she left for school. That was one of the last times anyone remembers seeing her. Sometime after that, Pietrowick seemingly vaporized, leaving behind almost no trace except for the pocketbook that was later discovered by the side of the road. Her disappearance, as decades went by and investigators made little progress, increasingly seemed like a mystery that would never be solved. Her daughter feared that her mother, who she had last seen when she was 11, would be forgotten. But after 51 years later, on March 19, 2018, investigators uncovered skeletal remains buried near the basement of a home in Southold, on the northern tip of Long Island. DNA tests confirmed it to be Pietrowick's. The home had once belonged to a married police officer, William Boken, with whom she had a romantic relationship with after she left her husband. Also, Boken nearly disappeared himself, leaving his job, the area, and his own family not long after Pietrowick vanished. He died in New York City in 1982 and was buried on Hart Island, the city's Potter's Field. Investigators had searched the basement of the house in 2013 and even dug up part of it, but nothing was found. In March 19, investigators returned to the basement and searched an area just a few feet away. The police were led back to the basement after Boken's former wife told a detective that a body had been wrapped in burlap and buried. Police, using a ground-penetrating sonar echolocating device, did not find anything initially, but they continued digging deeper through concrete and dirt. After reaching about 7 feet, a jawbone was found. Soon after, they uncovered an entire there once was a road in the mid-1990s, known by most locals as the Never-Ending Road. Specifically, the road's true name was Lester Road. Now, after 20 years later, the landscape of Corona has changed, and the Never-Ending Road is no more. However, years ago, Lester Road was an unlit road that people claim became a never-ending road when driven at night. The people who made such a drive were never seen or heard from again. The legend became so well known that people refused to even drive Lester Road during the day. Many teens drove up Lester Road at night in an effort to prove others wrong, but they never returned again. The perpetuation of the legend convinced local law enforcement to investigate. Lester Road took a sharp left turn at its end, and there were no guardrails. Beyond the curve lay a canyon, and on the other side of the canyon was another road that lined up so well with Lester Road that when viewed from the correct angle, especially at night, the canyon vanished from sight, and the road seemed to continue on up and over the hill on the other side of the canyon. Upon investigation of the canyon, dozens of cars were found fallen to their doom, with the decomposing bodies of the victims still on Monday, September 17, 2001, a man is found dead in a motel room in Amanda Park, Washington. He had used his belt to hang himself inside of a closet. 3 days previously, on Friday, September 14th, the man checks in using the name Lyle Stevick, and the address 1019 South Progress Avenue, Meridian, Idaho. He arrives at the same time as buses stop outside the motel, but nobody is certain how Lyle traveled there. He is given the key to room 8 but returns an hour later to complain about noise from a nearby trailer park. The motel clerk describes Lyle as giving off bad vibes, being spaced, and making her feel nervous. He is given the key to room 5. The following day, Saturday the 15th, numerous people noticed Lyle pacing up and down the highway, which suggests he may have looked like he was anticipating someone or something to arrive. Lyle spent 3 nights in the room. The only maid at the motel, Maricela, cleaned his room on Saturday, September 15th, and went back on Sunday to clean it again. However, this time, Lyle barely opened the door and turned down maid service. Maricela later told her daughter that she heard voices coming from Lyle's room and was certain it was not the television. On Monday, September 17, Lyle should have checked out of his room by 11:30. When he had not, Maricela knocked on the door. No answer. She opened the door and with her key walked into the room. She saw Lyle kneeling, his back facing her. She thought he was praying, but something did not feel right, so she left the room and called the motel owner. When law enforcement arrived, they discovered a folded comment card with "for the room" written on it. Inside there was $160. They found a crumpled piece of paper on which suicide was written in all caps. A Gideon Bible was bookmarked to John 12:33. This, he said, signifying what death he should die. But what police didn't find is where the mystery lies. Stevick left no ID. Running his DNA, dental information, and fingerprints through law enforcement databases yielded nothing. Lyle Stevick appeared in no phone directory, search engine, electoral roll, or census, except a character named Lyle Stevick from a novel by Joyce Carol Oates entitled You Must Remember This. Also, the address Lyle gives on check-in belongs to the Best Western Rama Inn in Meridian, Idaho. The hotel was located, but none of the staff members recognized the deceased. Eventually, the Stevick case went cold. Almost 17 years later, on May 8, 2018, it was announced by the Grays Harbor Sheriff's Office that Lyle Stevick had been identified through DNA analysis in comparison with genetic relatives performed by the DNA Doe Project. He was from Alameda County, California, and was 25 years old at the time of death. The Grays Harbor County Sheriff's Office notified his family, who had believed him to be alive and assumed he did not want to associate with his family. His family had a set of his fingerprints that were taken in grade school as part of a children's identification program. The Sheriff's Department compared those prints with the post-mortem prints taken in 2001 and made a positive identification. His family has chosen not to identify him publicly. Ryan Stallings became ill on July 9, 1989. His mother, Patricia Stallings, rushed him to the hospital in St. Louis, Missouri, where tests detected high levels of ethylene glycol, the main ingredient in antifreeze, in his blood. On the suspicion that he had been poisoned, Ryan was placed in protective custody. A few weeks later, Patricia was permitted to visit him briefly. Ryan died the next day, September 4, and Patricia was arrested and charged with murder the day after that. Antifreeze was found in the basement of the Stallings home on Lake Wawanoka in Jefferson County, west of St. Louis. At the time of her arrest, Patricia was pregnant. In February 1990, she gave birth to her second son, whom his parents named David Jr. Like his brother, David Jr. was placed in protective custody, where, even though he had no contact with Patricia, high levels of ethylene glycol were detected in his blood. His condition was diagnosed not as poisoning, but as methylamylonic acidemia, or MMA, a rare genetic disorder that in all likelihood had claimed his brother's life. The significance of that seemed obvious, but Patricia's lawyer failed to present evidence regarding MMA at her 1991 jury trial. The jury found Patricia guilty and sentenced her to life in prison without parole. On May 8, 1991, the Stallings case was featured on Unsolved Mysteries, which William S. Sly, professor and chairman of the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, happened to see. Sly conducted additional tests on Ryan's blood, confirming that he died of MMA, not poisoning. On September 20, 1991, police announced at a press conference that the charges were being dismissed. The same day, David Jr. was returned to the custody of his parents. With treatment, his long-term prognosis was thought to be good. 22nd November 1963, one of America's most controversial presidents, was sitting in the back of a 1961 Lincoln Continental four-door convertible as it made a wide turn onto Elm Street at Dealey Plaza, Dallas. His journey was a part of his official tour of Texas, and many people had lined the roads to see their president pass by. As the car rolled through the open, grassy area of Dealey Plaza, a man standing by the side of the road opened an umbrella, even though it was a bright sunny day and no sign of rain. Seconds later, John F. Kennedy was shot and killed, becoming the fourth United States president to be assassinated. As the motorcade accelerated away and raced for Parkland Memorial Hospital, the umbrella man stood motionless for a few moments, calmly closed his umbrella, and sat down on the pavement. For a few moments, he spoke to another mysterious man before coolly walking away in the direction of the Texas Book Depository, the building from where Lee Harvey Oswald had allegedly fired the shots that killed Kennedy. All of this has been recorded on film. Most believe he was part of the conspiracy and was there to signal the shooters. Others suspected that he might actually be an assassin himself, firing a poisoned dart gun concealed in his parasol. 15 years later, in 1978, a man named Louis Stephen Witt came forward claiming to be the Umbrella Man. He even claimed that he still had the umbrella in question. Witt claimed that he purchased the umbrella simply to annoy Kennedy. Decades later, Joseph Kennedy, the president's father, had been a supporter of British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain. Neville Chamberlain, in turn, had been an appeaser of the Nazi Party, once traveling to Hitler's private retreat to smooth things over with Führer himself. Those who opposed Chamberlain's work soon began to mock him, using a signature accessory of his as their ammunition, his large black umbrella, ever present by his side. Throughout the 1930s and 40s, the black umbrella had been used in satirical cartoons to poke fun at the Prime Minister, as well as in protest. Witt's only intent that fateful November day was to wave the black umbrella at Kennedy in hopes that he would recognize it. 13th, 1991, 48-year-old Pearl Bruns disappeared in her home in South Portland, Maine. Her daughter from one of her last marriages reported her missing. A police detective, Linda Barker, went to check into her house and found that Pearl's personal belongings, such as jewelry and clothing, were all still there, including her beloved Cadillac. There was no evidence that Pearl had gone anywhere. In Pearl's bedroom, she found a partially packed suitcase with high-velocity impact blood splatter on it. When she searched even further, she found traces of blood in the bathroom, in the hallway, in the kitchen, and leading her outside to the cellar. There she found traces of blood on the cellar steps. She followed them down into the cellar, where she found dirt that had been disturbed. Police began to excavate the cellar with shovels but found nothing. It seems that they had hit a dead end. Police questioned Pearl's fourth husband, Bill. He said that he had a fight with Pearl on the night of August 11 when he had left to pick up Chinese food. When he returned, Pearl was gone. On September 28, 1991, a hiker found Pearl's purse along a trail in New Hampshire, 200 miles away. Inside was her driver's license and her pocketbook with cash. Police set out to search her home once more. On the second search, a trained cadaver dog was brought in. It wasn't long before the dog laid on a space he believed a body was buried. Once again, police dug, and once again, nothing was recovered. Not wanting to let this one slip through, police issued another warrant, this time using luminol to aid their search. When the luminol was applied in Brun's home, blood had been splattered everywhere. On the steps leading down to the basement, more blood. Each step indicated that a bloody object had been dragged downstairs. At the bottom of the stairs, some 4 feet across, was a large blood stain. Most alarming was the blood stain was found in a 38 by 25-foot dirt crawl space. On the dirt floor was a blood stain of a human body, the same height as Pearl Bruns. 13 months after Pearl's disappearance, the Bruns residence is searched once more, this time with a forensic tool, ground-penetrating radar. Geophysicist Scott Calkin takes a reading on the Bruns cellar and finds an anomaly. He had found consistent reflectors along the basement floor, except for one blank space. The blank space on the reading can mean one of two things: a disturbance in the soil or something buried underneath that's absorbing the radar energy. Either way, in order to learn what the anomaly was, they'd have to dig. Investigators began to excavate. They dug a few shovelfuls, and at one point in time, a plastic bag was struck. It was buried 2 feet below the surface, which turned out to be a head and case in the plastic bag. It was a badly decomposed human body. The individual was wearing a wristwatch with Pearl's name engraved on the face and had pink shoelaces, like the ones Pearl was last seen wearing. The autopsy report shows she had been struck in the head 3 times by a fist and bled to death. Bill ultimately pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was sentenced to 15 years. It was later learned through medical records that Pearl had been recently diagnosed with terminal cancer and had less than 6 months.